Hello. In this video we're going to be talking about metabolism and energy. So let's not waste any of your time. Let's get right to it. Now when we're talking about metabolism and energy, hey, we want to just put out some general information. That's the purpose of this video. We want to think about the laws of thermodynamics. That's going to be a big part of what we're doing. The idea of increasing energy increases entropy, which simply means increase the amount of kinetic movement of the molecules. When we take away energy or we store energy, we're going to reduce the entropy. We're going to reduce the chaos. But we'll talk a lot about that. But what we're really beginning here is a 3-chapter look at the process of your body generating energy from the foods that you eat, from the carbohydrates, the sugars, taking us back to chapter 3, the idea of photosynthesis, the idea of cellular respiration. That's our next 2 chapters. Okay, but we're going to be, just looking at just the flow of energy. So chapter 6, which is what we're in, is designed to be the foundation for chapter 7 and 8. The things that we hear about, not only are they going to continue things that we've emphasized, like dehydration synthesis, like hydrolysis, but we're going to introduce some other words that are going to be a part of that, and one of those is, and some of those are, as you can see, kinetic and potential energy, and hopefully those are words that you are pretty familiar with. The idea of energy that moves, kinetic, the idea of energy that is stored, potential, and you've probably looked at them from a physical science standpoint in the past, but we're going to look at them obviously from a biological component, with the idea of your sugars storing energy, breaking those apart to release the energy, and everything that happens from that. Now when we think about energy, we simply want to think about the ability to do work, providing the resources needed to do work. And as we've talked about in the previous slide, there's kind of 2 states of energy. Either it's moving, okay, or it is not moving, or in this case stored energy as potential. The idea of chemical energy, the energy is available within a molecule, that's stored within a molecule. That's going to be our focus here, as we mentioned, for 3 chapters. But energy can take many forms, as you can see there. When you think about mechanical, heat, sound, electric, and if you think about this process of energy transformations, I know from a physical science standpoint, but the idea that cells, they work the same way. They follow those same rules, those same guidelines. If you think about, I know I got overhead, I got a light, and I got a light here, a couple lights above me, and I got a light switch right over there. If you think about that light switch, the light switch itself, okay, it's just a simple machines. You've got a wheel and axle, you've got a fulcrum, you've got an inclined plane with the switch. And the idea, when I flip that switch up, and it opens up that pathway for the electric current to flow. Now that mechanical energy from flipping the switch has been converted to electrical energy that roars through the wires up to the lights, where it is then converted to radiant energy. Okay, and not just radiant energy, but if I were to put my hand on that bulb, I'd get a burn, and possibly a pretty bad burn, because some of that radiant energy has been converted to heat. So that's the idea of energy transformation, and that's what we're going to be looking at, how energy transforms from one form to another, but in this case in a biological setting, But if you think about potential and kinetic, you got pendulum here beside me. Now, circle 1 and circle 4 are meant to be the edge of how far that pendulum will swing. And if you think about 1 and 4, even if you're watching a pendulum swing, you never see it not moving. But if you could have an instrument that could detect movement in such a small amount, you could, or if you could just slow it down, if you filmed it and slowed it way down, you could actually see or actually measure that at some point in time, and it's a very small amount of time, we're talking take a second and divide it, maybe into hundreds, but there is a period of time, as I said, although very small, that the pendulum actually stops. And when it does stop, it is 100% potential energy. So when it's at spot number 1 over there, it's come up and now it's stopped, 100% potential, and as it begins to fall back down, that potential energy transforms into kinetic energy. And you have a situation where as it goes from 1 to 3, that the kinetic energy percent moves up, increases, and the potential energy decreases. And when it gets to 3, now it's 100% kinetic, and as it works its way up to 4, again that kinetic energy decreases and the potential energy increases. And in class we'll look at a simulation that showcases that. But when you think about the idea of potential and kinetic energy, obviously the position, okay, or in our case the size of the molecule is going to increase or decrease the amount of potential and kinetic energy. If I were to take apart a water molecule, which is very small, I would get some energy release. But if I take apart a bigger molecule like a sugar, a disaccharide, a polysaccharide, there's going to be so much more energy involved because there's more room to store it. So when you think physical science potential kinetic energy, the lady that's on the top of the staircase or hill or ramp or whatever that is, if we were to increase the size of that ramp, then both the potential energy, kinetic energy amounts would increase. If we lowered the ramp, they would decrease. Same with the cell. If we increase the size of the cell, of the molecule, then we would increase the amount of potential and kinetic energy. And if we decrease the size of the molecule, again we would decrease the amounts. But something else that we're going to spend a lot of time looking at, we're going to be looking at pathways, anabolic pathways, catabolic pathways, but really the process of metabolic pathways, especially when it comes to enzymes. Because even though we've been stressing dehydration synthesis, hydrolysis are the ways that molecules are built or broken down, what we haven't mentioned is that there's a particular protein that does that. We've talked about the process, but in this chapter we're going to talk about the player, the enzymes. But the idea of metabolic pathways, that's simply a process that a molecule is changed. It's a series of steps, and you can break it down, which would be a catabolic pathway, and release energy, or you can build it, which is an anabolic pathway, and the energy would be stored inside of the molecule. And these two can go back and forth. It's one of the things that we're going to stress in these 3 chapters is that molecules are broken and built all the time, and some molecules like ATP are built for the purpose of being broken down and rebuilt, for the idea of creating and gaining energy. But anabolic, catabolic, anabolic builds, anabolic steroids are designed to build muscle mass. Okay, and then catabolic would break down muscle mass, and that could be through exercise. It can also be through some things like starvation. There's a reason why that, you know, if you see people or animals in commercials or public service announcements, and you see that side, but it's pretty sad. But there's obvious signs of muscle mass being broken down. But we're going to bring in a bunch of words that are part of the building process, part of the breaking down process. Another set of those words you can see on the screen is endergonic reactions, exergonic reactions. These are reactions, these are chemical words. These are chemical reactions that either build molecules or create a product or break down products and release energy. Now, the idea of these metabolic pathways, as we mentioned, and this is material that we've already seen, but with a illustration to kind of drive home the message. Anabolic pathways build molecules. You can see I've got 4 monomers in the picture beside me here, and then using some energy to put those monomers together to make, in this case, a polymer. But there's energy stored inside of that molecule, and when it's broken apart in the catabolic pathways, energy is released. Now, the interesting side of when cells do this, it's an exponential release. It's not just whatever energy you put into it is what you get out, because that wouldn't be beneficial at all. And the way to think about that is think about a firecracker. And when you think about chemical reactions, the heat from the fuse greatly exponentially grows the amount of energy that's released when that firecracker explodes. It took a little bit of energy to build it, okay, but because of a chemical reaction with the gunpowder and the heat, you get an exponential release of energy. And that's the same thing with the cells. You put a little bit into it, because we're putting them into an enzyme and a reaction, the amount of energy that's released is exponential, and that energy is used to do everything that the cell needs to be done. So it's similar to, metaphorically, if I had a machine that I could put $1 into, and then I get $5 back, and I could take one of those dollars and put it back in the machine and get $5 back. So what we want to stress is that it's a exponential growth of energy that you receive from the energy that you put into the molecule. And of course, all this is based on, you know, this, when we talk chapter 7, chapter 8, we're talking about the food chains. We're talking about the energy from the sun that the plants take in, and with photosynthesis make those sugars, and then the herbivores come along and eat the plants, and then the carnivores come along and eat the herbivores, and then they receive all those sugars that the plants made. And of course that the sugars that are in the energy within the molecules of those sugars is obviously potential energy. It's stored, but during cellular respiration, when those molecules are broken down, then it converts to kinetic energy, and the idea of releasing the energy. So it's kind of like, you know, exercise. If you want to think about the conversion between anabolic and catabolic and potential and kinetic, if you think about exercising, okay, your body starts working, and so you start exercising, so your body's going to start breaking down sugars to release energy to help with that. So it's the idea of that energy has gone from potential to kinetic, and then in the aftermath of exercising, your body's got to repair the muscle, and so now you're going anabolic, catabolic. You used anabolic to repair those muscles. You're going to use catabolic to break down the sugars. So it's a huge cycle, and it just goes back and forth. And that's one of the emphasis that we're going to stress, is that this isn't a once in a while. It's a continual process of building and breaking, building and breaking. Well, that's our video over the general information for metabolism and energy. The next time we get together, we're going to be talking about the words associated with building molecules. So we'll see you then.